and I'm going to talk about a paper that I published together with Heidi Leonhardt and Clive Spash last year in Gaia on the question to grow or not to grow. That is the question. And I would like to start my presentation with that short question. Do you think that everything has to grow endlessly? And I would argue that in most areas of life, we can easily accept that growth is limited and that it can sort of stay within certain planetary boundaries. So for dough, for example, it obviously has to prove, but the bread isn't going to get any better if it has proven too much. And kids are going to grow up, but once they're adults, they have grown enough. Yet when it comes to the economy, things are a little different, and there is a surprising consensus between all sorts of different political stakeholders, media, but also researchers and other stakeholders, that we should continuously strive for growth on a global level, no matter the negative side effects or consequences. Yet we can already observe that there are negative side effects attached to the continuous expansion of production and obviously also of resource inputs. And it is often argued that we need this growth in order to maintain our healthcare systems, the welfare state, innovativeness, competition, etc. Yet when we look at the data of the last years, we can see that this argument that growth will increase welfare and decrease poverty and inequality isn't so true anymore. And this has made us wonder, is there maybe an alternative to this unquestioned concept of growth? And this was the starting point for our master thesis and the paper I'm going to present. So we had two research questions in mind, one being, so what are the structures and mechanisms leading to the desire for growth? And are there alternatives to it? And how do they avoid these mechanisms? And we focus specifically on SMEs because they are the backbone of the Austrian economy, and there's very little research on them so far. So yeah, we started with big literature research and looked into 3 different strands of literature. One being business literature that mainly focuses on the natural stages of growth. Then there was growth critical literature that very much presents growth as an imperative, and then literature on non-growing firms. With that literature in mind, we went to our empirical part, where we interviewed the owner-managers of 20 different firms of the production sector in Austria, all SMEs that we interviewed about their motivations to grow. So the question we asked them was, well, what do you expect from firm growth? And based on the literature that we did, the analysis, we presented them with 44 different small cards like these and asked them to rank them according to their level of agreement with them. And yeah, based on the literature in the first place, we thought, well, there are apparently a couple of reasons why a company must grow, like interest rates, growing demand, but also competition of others. But then when looking into the data that we received from these Q methodology interviews with the firms, well, we saw that there's actually many, many different reasons why companies want to grow. And yeah, this was very interesting for us. And when we saw these results, we thought, okay, we could look into different typologies of growers and see, do they maybe differ in terms of motivations and reasons to grow? And the first group we identified are the growth tacticians, who very much grow for structural and more pragmatic reasons. So they think it's good for stability and for their overall financial situations, but they don't necessarily think that growth is inevitable. It's rather just good for the company, employees, and the connection with the local region. Growth optimists, on the other hand, think that there are only positive side effects attached to it. There's nothing negative about it. And for many managers, it was also a matter of sense of achievement and a societal expectations that they would comply with. This was very different in turn for the third group, which are the growth skeptics, because they definitely saw that there are negative effects attached to it, both for the environment on a big scale, but especially also for firm culture. And because they think that there are different ways to reach the exact same corporate goals, they deliberately decided not to grow. And this was an interesting insight for us already that these exist. And in order to find out more about, well, what are their motivations and how do they actually do business if they don't grow, we conducted in-depth interviews with those 4 non-growing firms that we had in the sample. And the results of this are that the strategies that they have overall are actually not so different. They just have different underlying values that basically define how they want to do business and what kind of goals they have. So they just have a different way of interpreting the same goals and achieving them. And I would like to go into more detail. So human relations and customer relations were a super important aspect for them. And they very much focused on creating a team spirit and also creating a sort of sense of identification with the firm, and try to be selective about their customers in order to stay within their capacities. When it comes to finances, cautiousness was key for them, so they really tried to be as independent as possible, especially from foreign capital, and try to also limit their resources that they have to put on marketing by, for example, doing a careful market observation. Another sort of common denominator we found is that they try to place themselves in niche markets in order to avoid competition a little more, if possible. So yeah, overall the strategies are fairly similar, and it's mainly the values of the owner-manager that defines how they're going to deal with that and how they want to strive for their different goals. So summary of findings: growth is not necessarily perceived as an imperative, but rather as a chance or also deliberate choice. There are many different reasons why firms want to grow, depending on what the owner-manager thinks is best for the firm and for themselves. And succeeding without growth is possible, but under certain conditions and with a different interpretation of corporate strategies. So yeah, that was my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to your questions.